What does a great coaching job look like in college football? To me, there's 5 aspects of a great coaching job. First, exceeding expectations. Like it or not, every coach has their own expectations and they aren't always even or fair. Clark Lee and Vanderbilt winning 7 games is way more impressive than Kirby Smart and Georgia winning 10. Second is making the most out of your roster. I accept that recruiting is a huge part of the job responsibility for coaches, but regardless of how the roster is set up, being able to out-scheme your opponents and overcome a talent gap to win games is very impressive. Third is results in close games. A strong record in one-possession games usually means you prepare your team better to do the little things than your opponents, and your team is more composed than your opponent when it matters most. That's a direct reflection of coaching. Fourth, how do you do in rivalry games? Can you win the games that just mean more? Finally, how do you do compared to others with the same resources? Maybe this is a previous coach, your conference rivals, or similar programs in other conferences. There's a coach that fits all of my categories for a great coaching job, and that is Northwestern's David Braun in 2023. The Big Ten Coach of the Year put together one of the most impressive but seemingly forgotten coaching jobs, and that's despite being only 2 years ago with circumstances that extend far past the criteria I laid out earlier. Northwestern has been one of the most up-and-down programs in the country since the best coach in program history, Pat Fitzgerald, took over in 2006. Before that, Northwestern was bottom feeders in the Big Ten, with only one 10-win season in the program's history. There's a stretch in the late 1970s and early 1980s where Northwestern only won 3 games in 6 seasons. Under Fitzgerald, the general awfulness was replaced by a very solid program with some of the highest peaks in program history. Big Ten West championships in 2018 and 2020, and a total of 3 10-win campaigns. While the Cats look to continue their even-year success in 2022, starting with a Week 0 comeback win over Nebraska in Dublin, that would become the only win in by far the worst season under Fitzgerald. He would try to improve on the roster for 2023 with a small 6-player transfer portal class, including quarterback Ben Bryant from Cincinnati, wide receiver Cam Johnson from Arizona State, and edge Richie Haggerty from Southern Illinois. Still, the class was far from highly rated, ranking 73rd by 247 Sports, and a true roster improvement from the transfer portal was infeasible due to Northwestern's notoriously strict academic standards, especially among transfers. Things got worse for the program in July after a hazing scandal forced Fitzgerald to first be suspended and then fired on the 10th. Surely, that wouldn't backfire on Northwestern. Regardless, this brought David Braun to take over as the interim coach, a man as familiar with Northwestern as the transfers he helped bring in. Braun was hired on January 7th as a defensive coordinator, a role he served in his 4 years at North Dakota State. He led great defenses at one of the best FCS programs, but have never been a head coach before, never coached at the FBS level, and was getting thrown to the wolves in what was expected to be a lost season in Evanston. By the time the season began, Northwestern would have one of their best opportunities to win a Big Ten game all year with a cross-division trip to Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights under Greg Schiano hadn't made a bowl in his first 3 seasons, and before that were national laughingstock. But even this contest was an easy win for Rutgers, holding Northwestern to just 12 yards rushing and winning 24-7. Northwestern would win its home opener 38-7 against a bad UTEP team, but unsurprisingly get blown out themselves against number 21 Duke and Riley Leonard 38-14. With Minnesota coming to town, could we finally see Northwestern wake up? It took a while, but yes, and it gave us one of the most surprising games of the 2023 season, both at the time and in hindsight. The Wildcats started in a 21-0 hole to the Gophers with 2 touchdowns from Athan Kaliakmanis. Bryce Kurtz would score a long touchdown from Ben Bryant to get on the board, but Northwestern would still trail by double digits, going down 31-10 late in the third quarter. Finally, with 12 minutes to go, Cam Porter would score from 1 yard out to cut the deficit. Northwestern would force a 3-and-out, and after 3 passes to Bryce Kurtz, we had a 1-possession game. Punts were traded, and Northwestern would get a chance to tie it up with 2:07 to play. Bryant rallied the troops down the field, and with just 2 seconds left, tied the game. In overtime, Northwestern would hold Minnesota 3 points and stick the dagger in Minnesota, with Bryant's 4th passing touchdown of the ballgame. Charlie Mangarini was a hero for the Wildcats. Considering Northwestern couldn't eclipse 300 yards against Rutgers or Duke, getting nearly 537 points to come back from a 21-point fourth-quarter hole was shocking. The fans deservedly stormed the field as Northwestern gave the fans something they hadn't seen in a long time. A win over a decent team, and hope for the future. Hope built upon itself the following week as Northwestern held a 10-3 first-half lead over 4-0 Penn State with the game knotted up at half 10-all. However, Penn State would figure things out and pull away to win 41-13. Worse, quarterback Ben Bryant was injured in the second half, bringing in redshirt sophomore Brendan Sullivan. He adds more of a running threat for the Wildcats and started 4 games in 2022, so the Cats weren't totally lost on offense. We saw that in Week 6 as Northwestern hosted FCS Howard. Sullivan had 3 touchdowns and no turnovers, but the game was still closer than expected. While Northwestern had a 23-7 lead in the fourth, Howard made it interesting with 2 touchdowns, but ran out of time to complete the comeback as the Cats got back to 500 at 3-3. The next week, Northwestern couldn't get anything on offense again in a road loss to Nebraska. Brendan Sullivan had no touchdowns and a pick as Northwestern couldn't find their way in the end zone and lost 17-9. The following week, that would all change. Northwestern would go back home and, instead of facing another Big Ten West team in a struggle to complete a forward pass, get to play 5-2 Maryland. I think playing Maryland is always a good way for a Big Ten team to kickstart an offense, and it certainly was today. After an opening drive punt, Sullivan led the troops on 3 straight touchdown drives. Northwestern would lead 24-17 at the break and extend the lead to 33-20 in the fourth quarter. Maryland would make things interesting with a Jason Jones touchdown grab and force a 3-and-out, but Coco Azima would end the game with an interception. Unfortunately, you can't always play Maryland, and the next week, Northwestern would play Iowa. This whole offense thing was replaced by punting and 2-yard runs. The game was scoreless at halftime before a Deacon Hill passing touchdown in the third quarter. Northwestern would knot the game up with 1:50 left, and since the Iowa offense legally isn't allowed to make a clutch drive, we would get overtime. Just kidding. Iowa wins on a 53-yard field goal. Northwestern lost because Deacon Hill led a game-winning drive. That would mark the final start for Brendan Sullivan. Ben Bryant was back, and he would be the starter the rest of the season. Northwestern's next game would be against Bryant's old coach at Cincinnati, Luke Fickell. By halftime, Fickell wished he was still coaching the Bearcats. Northwestern was up 24-3 at the break with 3 TDs from Bryant. The Cats would coast to a 24-10 victory, a true shocker to everybody. Next up was Purdue in a bit of an uglier game. The Boilermakers went for 443 total yards and 303 yards rushing on the normally stout Northwestern defense, but they couldn't finish their drives, finishing with 4 turnovers, 3 turnovers on downs, and a missed field goal. Northwestern led the entire game, up 23-7 in the fourth quarter, but a Purdue touchdown and stop gave the Boilers hope for a comeback. Instead, like the Maryland game, Northwestern sealed the 23-15 win with an interception and clinched bowl eligibility. I see why Ryan Walters was fired so soon. Mans was horrible, but that just shows how important coaching is and how good David Braun was doing. Remember that point I made about rivalry games back at the beginning? Northwestern is like the only Big Ten team with only one rival, and they would end the season against Illinois to fight for the Land of Lincoln trophy. I don't think anybody expected to see 88 points on the board, but that's what happened at Memorial Stadium. Northwestern would secure the trophy for the first time since 2020 and conclude the regular season 7-5. This was another game where the Wildcats were soundly outgained, but made a clutch stop on a 2-point conversion to hold on and win.
Inside of the bunch down in these situations. Here's Paddock, rolling, throwing, tipped in the air.
The regular season campaign ended on a 3-game win streak, which placed Northwestern in the Las Vegas Bowl against 8-4 Utah. Today, the defensive version of Northwestern came back, earning a first-half shutout and holding Utah quarterback Bryson Barnes to just 55 yards passing and 2 interceptions. In the end, the Wildcats took the lead on a Bryce Kurtz touchdown reception, forced a 4th down stop on the Utes, and came away with a bowl win 14-7, finishing the 2023 season with a phenomenal 8-5 record, all things considered. Some of the key characteristics of well-coached teams showed up when looking at the season stats of Northwestern. Braun's team was disciplined, with averages of 5.3 penalties and 42.6 yards per game, and took care of the football with a plus 13 turnover differential. It's hard to imagine the Wildcats would have had any success without this, as they gave up an average of 64.5 total yards per game, and were even outscored by an average of 1.6 points per game. Outside of the statistics, Northwestern finished 4-2 in one-possession games, with the only losses coming to great coaches in Matt Rule and Kirk Ferentz without Ben Bryant. The Wildcats also took care of business against their only real rival in Illinois on the road, keeping them out of a bowl. My final point is looking at some of Northwestern's peers. The Cats probably have the fewest resources in the conference, comparable to only Indiana, Purdue, and Rutgers. Indiana was 3-9, Purdue was 4-8, and Rutgers was 7-6. In other conferences, Northwestern is comparable to Stanford, California, Vanderbilt, and Duke. Stanford was 3-9, Cal was 6-7, Vanderbilt was 2-10, Duke was 8-5, and that's with a coach that's at Texas A&M now, and a quarterback that had Notre Dame in the national championship game the year after. I still don't understand why people don't talk about David Braun as much as they do. There aren't many coaches who could do what he did in 2023, given all the circumstances. I'm not even sure if Pat Fitzgerald could. I do understand that 2024 was not good as the Wildcats fell back to earth, and 2025 doesn't look much better. The new look Big Ten only makes things more difficult for Northwestern, who has nowhere near the same resources and commitment to football as their peers. I mean, I don't even know if Braun's going to be the right guy long term. However, with all that, it just makes the 2023 season for Northwestern even more underrated. If you're still watching this, thank you. I'm going to keep telling some unique and forgotten stories of college football. I want all of you guys to be along for the ride. Until next time, goodbye.